I've had quite a few experiences with ghosts. In each place I've worked, I've seen a ghost, and my house is haunted by a small boy, my great-granddad, and a monk, although it has been fairly quiet recently. Anyway, this story happened to me when I was 17. It was around 1991, and I was a trainee stylist at a hair salon in Essex in the UK. It may help if I just tell you the layout of the place first. The salon was a large rectangle with a door leading to a hallway on the left. Doors led off of the hallway on the right. It was kitchen, toilet, boss's office, and then the hallway opened up into a huge square where all the hair chemicals in the washing machine, etc. were kept. Everything in the salon was normal, and the haunting started quite suddenly. I used to feel as if I was being watched by a man from the hall doorway. I didn't like to be alone in the kitchen, and I was petrified to go to the toilet alone. It felt as someone was waiting outside for me. The feeling of fear used to intensify right by my boss's office door, and I found that not only did I start to run past that door, but several other girls who worked there also did. One day, I was alone in the back room, mixing up a hair color, and I was humming to myself, scared, when all of a sudden, a huge can of hairspray came shooting through the doorway and just missed me. I ran out of the doorway to see who had threw the product, but everyone was busy. When I checked the make of the spray, it was one we never used. The feeling went on for about 2 weeks, and I noticed that if I looked down the hallway, I could see a man in black, biking leathers, and a crash helmet standing by my boss's door. He was standing facing me and blocking the hallway. He was kind of see-through but not misty, but if you looked straight at him, you couldn't see him. One day, I decided I had to find out if anyone else could see him, so I hesitantly asked one of the other girls if she's seen anything odd lately. She remarked only the man in the hallway. I asked where, and she said exactly where I'd seen him, and by both of us talking, we realized that we were both describing the same man perfectly. By then, another girl came over, and she'd overhear and said that she'd seen him too. It turns out that we'd seen him, and felt petrified by his presence, but we all felt that the other would laugh or think of us stupid if we said anything. One day, we were at work, and my boss was standing at the front of the salon when an old woman came in. She told him she was a medium, and my boss jumped. When asked why he jumped, my boss said that it felt as someone was standing right next to him. The medium replied that indeed someone was standing right next to him, and that was his best friend. This particular friend got killed one night whilst on his motorbike. Apparently, the friend knew that my boss was going to be in trouble and was here to help and comfort him. She told us that our fearful feelings were because the man died so suddenly and unexpectedly, and he was projecting his feelings and we were picking them up. Literally the next day, we no longer felt the man's presence. It was as if he was glad that his friend knew he was around, and he just disappeared as quickly as he arrived. By the way, the ghost was right about my boss being in trouble. About 6 months later, he was taken to court for sexual harassment and indecent exposure. Maybe he should have paid heed to his friend's warning. Sorry this is such a long story, and it isn't particularly scary, but I was covered in goosebumps all the time I was typing, so at least it scared me. My personal favorite story didn't actually happen to me, but I got to see and smell the aftermath. I'm a manager in McDonald's, which is located in a mall. Most nights, I don't get out until after 10 p.m., and that means that I have to sit there at the transit mall across the street for an hour and a half, waiting for a bus home. They only run every 2 hours after 7 p.m. The buses usually start showing up around 11:20 or so. Well, on the night in question, my boss comes pulling up around 11:10, and the driver pops out of that vehicle like his butt is on fire. Now, I've ridden this bus for 4 years with the same driver most of that time, and he is a nice, average guy who isn't prone to stories, and he won't even talk about this now. He calls me over and asks me to get on the bus and see if I can smell something. I got on, and sure enough, it didn't smell too good in there. A sweet, icky, nasty smell, but it isn't real strong enough though, just barely there. When I told him that yes, I could smell something, He told me a truly strange tale. We live in a long, narrow river valley in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. The bus services several smaller cities and towns up and down both sides of the rivers. His run takes him west down one side of the river to the transit mall, then east up the other side of the river. He had just started his run west to the transit mall when he stopped to pick up a few people, so he had a few people on the bus with him when he stopped a few miles further down to pick up this one guy. As he put it, drivers pick up a sense for people after a few years, something that tells them that this might be a problem. This guy was perfectly normal, but he set off the driver's internal bells for some reason, so the driver was keeping an eye on him. They got another few miles down the road when the people in the back of the bus started complaining of a smell and opening the windows. It wasn't long before all the passengers and the driver all had windows open because the smell was quite strong and, as I said, quite nasty. He even got out of his seat at one stop and looked for something that might account for it, but couldn't find any place where the smell was stronger and might indicate a source. Eventually, he hit the outskirts of the city, and all his passengers, including the one he got a bad feeling about, had gotten off. Again, he looked through the bus, trying to find that smell, and couldn't find anything. He decided that since it was late, and he usually didn't pick up anyone until the transit mall, which was still a good 6 miles on up the road, that he would just turn off all the internal lights and cruise into downtown with some windows open and hope the smell went away. He had made it about halfway when the buzzer indicated that someone wanted off the bus went off. He set out of habit because his mind was on something else. He stopped the bus and opened the doors. No one got off because no one was on the bus. This unnerved him a little, but he rationalized it on the spot as to shorten the wiring, shut the doors, and off he went. Then he realized that the awful smell that had plagued the bus for almost 30 minutes, despite opening windows, was starting to fade. Now he started putting two and two together and not liking the smell one bit. That was why he spent the whole way into the transit mall, hoping for someone to get on the bus to verify that the smell existed. I was the only passenger he had on the final leg of his last run that night, and he asked me to ride all the way to the end of the run with him and let him drop me off at my stop on the way back. This was somehow how unnerved he was. I was off the next day, so I didn't mind not getting home until almost 1 a.m. So I did. Most people that I tell this story to agreed that this hapless bus driver gave a ride to more than just his paying fares that night. Whatever anyone's guess is, but it is interesting to know that there were no graveyards near either stop, and to my knowledge, nothing obvious that would explain it. Hi there. There are many people that know me that also know my story, but they are mainly close friends and also people who can attest to what I'm writing. My tale begins when I was a young girl, around 2 or 3 years of age, and I was nearing the time when I was almost ready to move from my cot, a big one, which was why I was still in at that age, to a proper single bed. I don't remember this, but my mother told me a few years ago when the ghost topic came up that she would often pass by my room to hers and hear me talking. Normal that a toddler would be talking at that age, right? Nope. Apparently, this was not the usual toddler babble. This was fully coherent, intelligent conversation. I would be sitting up in bed, clutching a teddy bear my grandmother had bought me, and talking to something that was sitting across from the cot at the other side of the room. My guess was this presence I was chatting with was sitting on my toy box, which was made to look like a little seat. My mother claims it frightened her at first, but I seemed happy and unhurt, and so she let it be. She never told me what I was talking about during those times though, only that this was almost as if I was an adult talking to another. That presence was one I came to recognize as I grew up as a friendly spirit, one I actually said hello to as I entered my room on occasion. The feeling I would get after that was always one of pleasantness and peace. I suppose that was the beginning of my ghostly experiences. I must explain about the house I grew up in. It was built well before World War I, in a new suburb of Melbourne, Australia. My room was actually the main room, and would have been the lounge or the sitting room when it was first used. It was the most ornate and had its own fireplace. Across the long hallway that ran from the living room to the front door was my parents' room and my little sister's room. Down the hall, we ended up coming into the lounge room and the dining room. That was the most original of the house. The kitchen, bathroom, and sunroom were all later extensions added in the 50s. Back to my tale. The next occurrence of a ghostly experience I can remember was playing with a homemade Ouija board with my best friend, and being silly little girls of about 10, we asked the deadly question, how do we know you're really here? Well, as it turns out, music from the now bricked-in fireplace started playing. It was a single saxophone playing soft, relaxing tunes. Although the sound wasn't in itself scary, the fact that it was actually playing after we asked scared us both out of our minds. The sound actually continued for a few days before it eventually faded out. When I was older, I'd researched the deeds to the house and asked around. Apparently, there was a musician who passed away in that room of the house in 1923. The next event I remember clearly happened when I was about 12. I'd had another friend sleep over for a night. Around 2 a.m., I woke up with a start to find a figure standing in my doorway. Instantly, it hit me that this was indeed a bad presence, and I started sweating. The presence was tall and menacing in its appearance, though. I couldn't see any distinguishing features. The one thing I do remember as clear as day was that he had a very bright, glowing red aura about him. That's what scared me the most. He was leaning against the left side of the door frame, casually, as if he were waiting for me to get out of the bed to get a closer look. Of course, there was no way I was going to do that, so I lay there watching him, watching me, until gradually he began to fade. He actually backed away from the door as he vanished. Anyway, once the figure had vanished, I leaned over my bookshelf that was at the end of my bed and asked my friend if she was awake. All she said was, "Did you see him?" We both burst into tears, and she crawled into my bed. We both fell asleep huddled up, too afraid to go to my parents' room. We have never been able to talk about that night. That was also when the trouble with my younger sister's room began. From that time, whenever I'd walk into my sister's room, I would get chills and just feel as someone was watching everything I was doing. There were several occasions when I even see shadows moving across the walls or objects moving out of the corner of my eye. I could never spend more than 5 minutes in that room by myself, and I could never go in there at night, not by myself anyway. At first, I thought my sister wasn't affected by the presence, but I was soon to be proven wrong. She suddenly started rocking herself to sleep at night, but she would do it so violently that she would occasionally hit the wall that the bed was pushed up against, and she would be making a constant ah sound that would almost be downing. When she was a little older and still doing it, I asked her why she did it. She said, "So I don't see the lights that come, and so I can't hear the noises." I burst into tears. My little sister was being terrorized, and there was no one around who would believe me. There were many times during our lives in the house that I would wake up, seemingly at the same time as my sister would sit up in her bed herself, though not awake, and just have her eyes open, staring into space towards my room. The first time she did this, I talked to her to see if she was alright, but there was no response. Whenever this happened again, I would wake her up and put her in my room on the spare bed. She would never know why I was waking her up, but what was happening was scaring me, and I didn't want her in that room anymore. One night, I woke up to find her clawing at the wall, trying to either crawl up, along it, or away from something that was scaring her. Even then, she was still asleep, though she woke up and burst into tears, and I ran into her room and begged her to sleep with me. From that night, whenever she wanted to sleep with me, I'd let her, school night or not. To test to see if we were crazy, I had several of my friends stand in the room to see for themselves. I did this in broad daylight, not at night, and even then, they felt very uncomfortable. We weren't crazy. The next, and probably last major event that occurred in the house before we moved was when I was about 15. I was sitting at my desk, trying to concentrate on some homework. My family had gone shopping about 20 minutes beforehand and had let me stay home to do my studies. I was sitting at my desk, which was pushed against the same wall the door was on. In fact, when the door was opened, It would hit against the side of my desk, which meant only open to 90 degrees, so I had a clear view into part of the hallway. Anyway, I was busily trying to concentrate on my homework when I heard someone running up the hall. I looked up thinking I'd just missed seeing the person run past my door. I yelled out for Erica, thinking that she might have stayed back and was playing around as younger siblings do. But there was no reply, so I put it down to my imagination again. But the noise happened over and over again. I got rather nervous, but went to investigate, finding nothing. I gave up eventually and headed out to the kitchen to do the dishes, as is my normal chore. As I was washing up, I distinctly heard the sound of someone walking the length of the kitchen, the sound of bare feet on limo, just that soft padding sound, but it still made me uncomfortable. I looked over my shoulder and saw nothing, so I just continued with the dishes. The moment after I'd turned around, I felt someone blow a stream of cool air across the back of my neck. I spun around, sending water everywhere, and stared at nothing. To my dismay, there was nothing in the room. I was so tense, I was actually at the point where I was wishing there was something I could see so I could scream and run from the house. As it was, I calmly walked outside and sat in the backyard playing with the dog until my family returned home. There were no more major occurrences of anything happening after that, except for the fact that something was still getting at my sister. That stopped as soon as we moved, though it did take a long while before my sister could finally relax in her bed, in her new room, and fall asleep naturally. So far, there's only been 2 different occurrences in the new house, which happened in late 1997. They both happened on the same night. My friend from university was over at my place, and we were studying late into the night, working on a combined essay. It was around 2 a.m., and my friend was sleeping on the couch in the next room, while I was typing my part of the essay. Suddenly, she rushed in and said that she woke up, and there was a white figure leaning over her and looking at her. She could only make out the shape of the face and determine it was male. He then vanished after a few minutes, and that's when she ran out to the kitchen. The second occurrence happened about an hour and a half later, when I was taking my break and having a nap. I had my back to the room and was woken up by footsteps behind me. Once again, there was no one there. This time, I didn't feel uncomfortable though, and was so able to remain calm and went back to sleep, only to be woken up a couple more times. I turned around to see a white figure vanish into the hallway. I haven't seen it again since. So that's my story. All true, and all happened within the space of 18 years. I'm now 20 years old, and waiting for the next one. My mother and I moved to Colorado when I was 15. We had all our stuff sent ahead of us, so we had no furniture to use for a few weeks while I finished the last of school, and my mother made all the final arrangements. A friend of my mother's told us that we could stay at her house until we left. Now, I was not too happy with this notion, because for as long as I can remember, this house had given me the willies just because it is one of those Victorian jobs with all kinds of windows, but a long dark hallway with not a single one. Better still, her mother had recently died, and strange stuff had started happening in the house. A few months earlier, while we were all eating at the kitchen table, a light that was hanging on the wall over the table had just switched itself off. I was sitting right under it when it did it, and I quite audibly heard that switch, and when I reached up to turn it back on, it was so cold. This light had been on for several hours, and should have been hot. Well, I should have learned about the spirit thing for lights right there, but things just got better. The morning after we descended on Jane's house, I got up at 5 a.m. so I could take a bath and wash my hair before I had to catch a bus at about 6:45. I was the only one up at that nasty hour. Now, Jane's bathroom is huge and had this old-fashioned claw-footed tub in it. There is an overhead light with a switch by the door, a lighted panel all the way around the mirror with a switch next to the mirror, and as a nightlight, Jane kept a set of those cheesy Christmas candle lights set on the back of the toilet with a switch and the cord. Now, every one of these light sources is at least 3 to 5 feet from each other. So I'm in the tub, minding my own business, when I find myself in total darkness. and I do mean total. Jane's house is out from anything on about 7 acres that she owns. Best yet, I heard that light switch flip off. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever tried to get out of a deep claw-footed tub in total darkness with shampoo in your hair that is trying to run into your already blinded eyes, with this panicky feeling that someone else is in the dark with you, but I don't recommend it. Once I had the overhead back on, I turned all the lights on, including the cheesy Christmas candle lights. A few mornings later, the same thing happened, only this time I had all the lights on. After about the count of 10 or so, while I am trying to absorb into my brain that it happened again, the light around the mirror goes out. I'm serious, people. I could hear those switches being flipped. Well, tell you what, I got my butt out of that tub and had the overhead back on before the cheesy Christmas candle went out. And yes, sir, it did go out. This became a morning ritual at this house. Not every morning, but at least 4 times a week. Another thing that happened to me during those 2 weeks was the cabinet door under the sink. The way our kitchen was set up, to get to the fridge or the back door, you had to walk right past that sink, and she had those old-fashioned metal cabinets. Well, the door would swing open with enough force to put a bruise on my shins, and I mean a deep muscle bruise here. That only happened maybe 3 times thankfully, but that was enough to have me almost climbing over the kitchen table to avoid that sink. These things only happened to me. Here's one that we would all see. There's this old-fashioned lamp on Jane's TV. It doesn't give off much light, but enough so that you can see where you're going. This lamp would flicker, and before anyone says anything about wiring or short, no. Jane had the lamp checked and the wiring to the house checked because she started worrying about a fire. This, of course, after we had already moved to Colorado, and it would do it when everyone is sitting down, so no one was moving around to jar the lamp. Jane had got remarried a few years later and moved out of the house. She still owns it, but her tenants haven't said anything to her about lights or anything, and now the lamp acts just fine. It might also help to know that about 6 months prior to all this, Jane's mother died. She was over 90 and had bad dementia when she died, but she still remembered Jane and would beg her every time Jane visited her at the nursing home to let her go home. 2 days after she died, Jane was cleaning out her mother's room, and not being in the greatest health herself, she got tired and decided to lay down on the bed and take a nap. In her dream, she said that she could see the door to that bedroom as if she was lying on the bed. Well, in walks her mother, about 20 years younger with 2 suitcases. She looks right at Jane and says, "I'm finally home, and now I am staying." That was when Jane woke up. All of my family pretty much lived in its own little neighborhood. This neighborhood had the weirdest things happen to it for most of my family, and had some really strange beliefs and so on. Well, one night, my dad, who is not too swayed by the idea that things can happen without explanation, and my uncle, who was deeply into the beliefs of the other world, were driving down the hill that circled around a little drive that was in front of my grandmother's house. What they saw will always be some sort of mystery because my dad came back so white-faced that to this day, I can't wipe that image out of my head. They looked towards my grandmother's house, and right below where the skirting of the house usually is for mobile homes, there was a little girl with no face, and in a little white gown rocking back and forth, in a little rocker shaking her head back and forth. Again, they said that she had no face, but they couldn't turn away from her, for she was drawing them closer and closer, until finally, my dad just decided to get out of there as fast as he could for whatever reason. I can't say for whatever reason why they were going to my grandmother's house in the first place. I could never imagine why this happened, but this is among the many things that happen in that area. I'm not sure if it is because so many of my relatives were into the unknown or what, but I guess they say that it does open your eyes to a whole new world when you are into the other things. I had an experience while in the US Army, now some 20 years ago, that always puzzles me. I was stationed at an army depot in the southwestern part of what was then West Germany, was a military police canine dog handler, My duty was basically to work during the hours of darkness and patrol the woodlands. My dog was attack trained and used airborne scent to scout and detect people and animals. The area I patrolled was also a wildlife refuge. As to the experience, I was on patrol, walking my dog, when out of the blue, my dog laid down and started to whimper and whine and started to crawl backwards, still in the laid down position. I myself hit the dirt, listened, and looked around in the blackness of night. I neither heard a sound nor saw any movement. I guess that this activity continued for at least 3 to 4 minutes. Then my dog stood up and continued being himself. I spent 26 months at this depot with that dog, and it never happened again. I've scouted deer, wild boar, foxes, rabbits, hedgehogs, weasels, and people with this dog, knew his alerts for all, so I feel strongly what scared him was not natural. I did not feel any presence at that time. I called my sergeant and reported alert, and the squad thoroughly searched the area with no further alerts. I've since then read in a novel about ghost stories of a soldier in World War II that had the same experience. I was told that the area, as most of Europe, was dotted with many battlefields. In fact, there were huge concrete pillboxes that were destroyed throughout my patrol area. Anyway, my friends and wife listened to my story, and I think they don't really believe it. Just thought you might shed some light on this experience that puzzles me to this day. Thank you for the time. I will try and make what is a long story short, but events like this must be lived to really understand, and even then, understanding is not really the correct phrase because there is never real understanding, just acceptance. I was 19, and my new wife was 17. We were struggling financially, to put mildly. This was in 1975. We heard of a house for rent for $35 a month on the gravel road, not too far from the small town in Arkansas where we were from. It was a wreck, old, unpainted, falling down. But at that price, what the heck? We were young, and to be honest, partiers. As long as we had a place to crash and have our friends over, well, it would do. The first we heard of the place being haunted was when an old man came around selling wood. We had a wood stove. He told us not to buy as much as no one ever stayed long, as people say the place is haunted, and I know for a fact a murder happened here years ago. Perhaps that set us up to start manufacturing a ghost, as some would say, but to tell the truth, we never gave it a thought. Every night was a party. Most of my friends still lived at home, and so our place became the hangout. But slowly, things got strange. It really started when I started talking about taking a job in Texas and our moving. It was as if something didn't want us to leave. This was something we were surprised later upon reflection, as if the life we had brought into the place was somehow welcome. Anyway, to strive for brevity, there was a room that we never used. It was always cold and eerie. Some of this is going to sound textbook ghost story here, but these are the events. This was a very small shack of a house, and we needed the room, but you just couldn't be in there long. This wasn't just us. Everyone said the same thing. We went to Texas to interview for the job. Upon our return, we found a strange sight. Everything from the refrigerator was in the center of the kitchen floor in a mound. Things were missing from around the house. We actually found the missing items in impossible places at later times, and the really strange thing was that all the doors and windows were still locked. My grandmother had been keeping an eye on things and had called us in Texas to tell us from looking in the window. It looked as if it was broken into, but she couldn't get in to see because somehow they must have locked up when they left. This was the beginning of it actually. The place began to be unlivable. No noises, feelings of not being alone, depression, feelings of suicide, and finally, the event that caused us to move out immediately. My wife had tried to stay there alone on night before this event, as I was away, but she could not. We had gone to bed, but had left the stereo on in an adjoining room. The stereo was a straight shot from our bed, nothing except a doorway without a door between us and it. My wife got up and went to switch it off. As she was returning, in clear sight of me in the bed, she screamed and dived into the bed. "Someone's in the house," was her words. I grabbed the pistol and went looking. Of course, nothing. But from her far shoulder to her buttocks was 4 scratch marks, like a hand had raked down her back. We moved out the next day. We just knew not to be there another night. The place is still there. We go there from time to time. It is in such a shape that no one lives there now. We have heard that others have had experiences in that old place, but this I can say, in all seriousness, those events so long forever ago shaped the way we see things, and we are always ready to give these types of stories an open-minded response, because we lived it. Hey everybody, Arkansas, 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 before anybody tries to correct me. Anyway guys, everybody knows that it's the time of year where it's January and there's no holidays or anything. So this is Phantom of Darkness with no holidays anymore. I mean, that's my name on Twitter if you guys didn't know. But I don't know why I'm saying that. I'm so glad that I'm starting to make longer videos for you guys, at least 10 minutes longer than usual, because last year I did 20-minute videos and I wanted to bump that up this year to 30-minute videos at least. I'll see if we'll do it, because I think we're doing it right now, because I mean the last 2 videos are 30 minutes. So with that being said, why don't you just share this video and start sharing around social media like Facebook and all the weird social media places that we always love to be around, and Twitterfy it, and social media like Facebook, like I just said, Facebook, and the Book of Faces, the Face of Life, you know what I'm saying? I figure if I just say it over and over, the same word, you guys will get it into your heads and be like, oh, okay, well, this is going to be on my mind, so I might as well just share it now. So if it's in your mind and I just keep saying Facebook over and over again, you guys will be like, oh my gosh, it's Facebook, and just share it away like it's nothing. Okay, I don't know why I'm making such a big deal of this, but seriously, guys, comment below, comment below, comment below. Okay, I'm kidding. No, but seriously, guys, I don't know what else to say, honestly. And it's pretty obvious, by the way, I'm just nonsensically babbling about. But I guess I'll see you guys in the next video because I love you, and I guess that's how it works, that's how love is exchanged. That's how we share the love. We just, comment, like, and subscribe, and, even if we don't do that, I don't care. I mean, we're just going to still hug each other and love each other to our heart's content. That's what matters, right? Anyway, guys, yeah, seriously, just ignore what I'm saying. I don't make any sense. All I'm saying is I love you guys, and I'm just really happy every time I get a video out that I start making even less sense in the outros, even less sense that I usually make in my outros. So, no, but seriously, guys, thank you so much for letting me be your source of entertainment for 30 minutes tonight, or this morning, or whatever part of the day you're at right now. But I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next video, because I'm not making any sense, like I said, and I need that mental hospital bill to be paid for so I can feel better in the future and I can continue to make content for you guys. Oh man, I'm insulting myself so badly. Anyway guys, good night, good morning, and I'll see you in the next video. Toodaloo!